So, can you tell us a little bit about why this passion? Why are you going out talking against book bans? And how has this impacted your life?
Well, I've always been very outspoken in the need for diverse literature. There's a quote by Dr. Rudy Sims Bishop that says books should be windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And I've always taken that to heart. A book, uh, every kid in our school deserves to see themselves and their families reflected in the characters and on the shelves. And I've always advocated for that. I became what I call an accidental advocate or an accidental activist in 2022. I went to my public library board meeting just as a resident of my community that just so happened to be an award-winning school librarian. I've lived in my community now 46 years, at the time 44. And I went and spoke because there were censorship attempts in my public library, and I became the target of extremists, death threats and just horrible things circulating in my community about me, a real targeted harassment campaign. And so, where I was already advocating for diverse literature and for students, every kid to be represented in the books and their families on the shelves, when I became a target, um, two things. Number one, I had a platform. When you're, 2021, I was the National School Librarian of the Year. When you're given a platform like that, you use it for good, or it's a waste of a platform. So I decided, well, I'll just use it. But also because I was being targeted and harassed, it was important for me to get my story and my side out. And that just took the shape of when I tell my story, I tell why I was outspoken in the first place, which is like how I became an accidental activist. And so I do go and speak about why book banning and censorship attempts are wrong.
Mhm. What do you think the impact is of book bans, particularly on our students?
Well, so there are several things happening right now. Um, so there's different things. There's a lot of censorship attempts right now that are happening where books are being challenged at schools, which is, I think, every parent's right. And just like it's every community member's right to ask a library to reconsider a book that's on the shelves. I think that's everybody's right. But what we're seeing is that if someone challenges a book, and these challenges sometimes are done by parents that are well-meaning and really concerned for their own child, but more often than not, what we're seeing is mass book challenges by extremist groups that are not parents. So there's a difference. And if you look at the books that they're challenging, the vast majority of them are by authors or with characters of color or from the LGBTQ plus community. So we're seeing that happen. And I actually already forgot the actual question that you asked me. Can you?
Sure. So, what are the impacts of book bans on our students?
So the impact of book bans on students, there's several things. When you book bans, when you remove a book from a shelf, um, because a character has two moms, or because I've seen a book by Ruby Bridges challenged and removed from shelves. You're telling the students of color that they don't need to be in the school either. That's the message, that they shouldn't belong. If you're taking out books with LGBTQ characters, you're telling those students in their school that they shouldn't exist either. That's the message you're sending. And that there's something wrong with them. When you have books that are written by authors from the Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC communities, and you're removing all of those books, you're saying, well, your race is not acceptable. And so it's not just an attack on books, it's an attack on people. It's an othering, and it's an attempt to silence voices. And when you ban books or when you challenge books, it's a ripple effect because librarians get scared because not only are books being challenged in bans, but there's actual legislation being passed in multiple states that say librarians can be imprisoned. Um, you know, and for having sexually explicit content. Well, librarians do not have sexually explicit content, but what that does is it makes librarians scared. And these laws are vague and they don't define, you know, what they're talking about. And so you have people overcorrecting and pulling way more books than the law requires. And you have librarians scared to do their own jobs and order books.